Welcome to Smart Route, the podcast by CallTrackingMetrics, where you'll hear stories from businesses at the intersection of marketing, customer experience, and sales. We're sitting down with business leaders and industry experts to dive deep into the path they took to find success. Here's your host, Courtney Tyson.
Hello and Happy New Year. Welcome to episode 23 of Smart Route, which is coincidentally our very first episode of 2023. Over the past couple of years, we've covered an array of topics on Smart Route that apply to marketers, but one we haven't touched on just yet is media buying. So today I'm super excited to sit down with my colleague and CTM's Senior Manager of Paid Media, Lisa Salvatore, to talk more about the new age of media buying, what this used to look like, and what it looks like in today's digital world. Thank you for being here, Lisa.
Thanks, Courtney. Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you. And before we dive in, I want to share a little bit more about you with our audience. So as Senior Manager of Paid Media at CTM, Lisa finds new and innovative ways to promote our call analytics and marketing attribution solutions to businesses and marketers looking for the actionable data they need to confidently make their marketing decisions, increase their conversions, and drive revenue. She has more than 15 years of paid media knowledge and expertise. And prior to CTM, she partnered with clients in the automotive, education, charitable giving, real estate, home services, and software verticals in her account strategy roles at multiple advertising agencies. So she has a ton of experience in this and super excited to learn from her today. So thank you again, Lisa, for taking time out of your day to chat with us.
You're welcome.
So when I think about media buying, I kind of think about traditional media, right? In the days of the brands competing for these like extremely heavily expensive Super Bowl ads, or how about the days of like the whole Coke and Pepsi advertising saga? But I know a lot has changed since then. So tell us more about how things have changed over the years. And can you also give us a quick look at just kind of what media buying meant in the past versus what it means today?
Sure. Yeah. And I actually think of it the same way too at first, right? Because that's what we grew up in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even when we started out, I think in the industry, that's how it was, right? But yeah, I think it should not come as a surprise to anyone that media buying has changed a lot. And that is because the majority of it today is digital. And many of the traditional ways we think about buying media in the past don't really exist anymore. So today, media buying, it's automated, it's highly targeted, and it's measurable. And that wasn't always possible in the past. As a media buyer, you had to rely on information like circulation, subscription volumes, TV ratings to make your buying decisions. You would have an ad budget, you would buy placements in these traditional media outlets like TV, radio, newspaper, magazines, industry pubs, things like that. And you could sometimes narrow your targeting a bit, maybe to a specific section of the newspaper, for example. But how did you know if someone who was reading about football or listening to the radio during a certain time period was really interested in what you were selling, right? It was a guessing game. If the audience you were reaching was truly in market, was aware of your brand, or was making a purchase from your ad. So it was tough. And it's just changed so much. Now, today, you can target really specific audiences. You can still target broad audiences if you want. You can use your own data. You can control how much you want to spend and when, and so on. So, and then really you can measure your performance today all the way down to the ad dollar to know what works and what doesn't. And it's just really all about the data now. So on one hand, media buyers have a lot more control today than they did in the past. But on the flip side, that they just face more pressure and higher expectations to deliver results. And then, I think all that being said, a lot of it is still the same, right? It's still competitive. It can be costly. Some of it is still fragmented. And you need strong messaging and creative to resonate with your audience. And there needs to be a strategy, right? That there's always needs to be a strategy for your media buying. That has not changed.
And that's all great. And so kind of what I'm hearing is that Technology is really what has helped media buying evolve. Right now, it's automated, targeted, measurable. As you had said, it's no longer this guessing game. And now there are different tools out there, right, that marketers can use. So let's talk about that a little bit. What tools can you use to make media buying more effective, easier, impactful, especially if you're an agency?
Sure. And yeah, you're right. There are so many tools out there. So if you're an agency or if you work in-house, when it comes to buying media, I think at the core, there are three main things you want to accomplish, right? You want to be efficient with your time. You want to maximize your return on investment. And you want to prove that your efforts are working. So when you think about that and you start deciding what tools you need to accomplish that, there's quite a few. So I can talk through a couple. I think to start, you just definitely want to make sure you have your conversion tracking in place for whatever ad channels you're running on, because that's how you'll know if you're actually driving the results from your media buying. Mm-hmm. So you can use tools like Google Tag Manager to really simplify that process, or you can use the ad platforms themselves, but it's critical. So make sure you have that set up. And don't forget about a tool like Google Analytics. You want to know what your visitors are doing on your site after they come from these ad campaigns you're running. You also want a CRM tool to house your leads. Because there's so much you can do with that data today. For example, you can build audience lists for targeting or exclusion from your CRM data. And at an agency, especially, sometimes the client will own that tool. So you just want to make sure you know what to ask for and how to gain access to that data so you can leverage it. Another tool, I mentioned earlier, the importance of data, right? Data is king in digital media buying, so you don't want to neglect that. So you'll want like an automated reporting tool or dashboard, like a Tableau or Google's Looker Studio is great. So that way you can visualize your data, compare it, connect it, present it, and so on. You no longer need to spend hours manually compiling your data. Another tool to think about if you want to run ad placements across multiple channels at once, like a display, native, connected TV, audio, for example, and if you have enough budget and resources, you should definitely consider a programmatic advertising platform. They just can provide a lot of automation, reach, and detailed targeting for you. And lastly, for tools, I have to plug CallTrackingMetrics here, an analytics, attribution, and reporting solution that can connect all of your media sources and integrate with the tools you're already using provides so much value. Being able to attribute your data, qualify it, and build custom reports is just a no-brainer. And it's just hard to imagine agencies not using a tool like CTM. Just no question, we're talking about media buying today, but as we go forward and in the future, there's no question that it's just going to come to rely on things like conversation intelligence, marketing automation, machine learning, and a lot of it already is. So you can get all of that from CTM. Okay, I could go on and on about tools, but I think that's a good start.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think about marketers having to execute their media buying strategy without all of these tools and not having all of this data behind their efforts. Like in the past, it wasn't a thing. And now that all these tools are out there to help support in their efforts and their strategy, it's like, you need to be using them, right, in order to make sure that you're executing and being successful. So just to recap, so some of the tools that Lisa had suggested using to support your media buying strategy, definitely need an analytics, reporting, or attribution tool that can connect all of your media sources together. A CRM is important, you said, for that lead tracking, right? An automated reporting tool or dashboard. You mentioned Tableau, Google's Looker Studio, something to kind of help you just comprehensively pull all of that data together, get you overview, right? You mentioned a programmatic partner, and then of course Google Tag Manager as a tool too, and then of course you mentioned CallTrackingMetrics. So all great examples of tools that could be used to support a media buying strategy. And again, all of those kind of tie into data measurement and data and measurement, right? So these are more important than ever in media buying. Why are data and measurement more important than ever, and how do you measure success, Lisa?
Sure. Well, it's a digital world today, right? There's no denying it. And that means almost everything we do online can be tracked. And that includes digital ad campaigns. So media buyers really can and should measure all the media they buy and leverage their data effectively, so they can fully understand the impact of where they're putting their ad dollars. It's really what it comes down to. And especially at times like this, I think when, there's so much financial uncertainty, will there be a recession this year? Are consumers going to be spending less? With so many unknowns, I think businesses really want to know exactly what works and what doesn't when it comes to the money they're spending on advertising. And there's just no longer an excuse for wasting ad spend on channels that don't perform well. And and as for measuring success, it really depends on the goals and objectives of a business, which can vary for sure. Mm-hmm. To some, it might be a 3-to-1 return on ad spend on something like Google Ads. To others, it might be X number of website visitors from a social campaign. So while success can vary, the need to measure that success is critical.
Sure. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to think about how, as time has evolved, media buying has become more digital because of the digital platforms out there. And with the digital platforms, we can measure them. So, use those tools to measure, make sure you're spending your marketing dollars appropriately and seeing the success that you're working for, right? Mm-hmm. You've talked a lot too about, and this is kind of, I think, an overarching theme for marketers too, in catering, right? And doing their jobs, like I should say, right? Providing that personalized experience across various channels. It's expected, I think, when it comes to media buying, right? How can you make sure that you're providing that experience?
Right. Yeah, there's so many headlines out there right now about personalizing the experience, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to remember that as technology and data become more sophisticated, so do consumers. They want brands to speak to them, to know what they want. They're more invested today than ever in a brand story, especially younger generations. So the expectation to deliver on what resonates with them is higher. So the more you can personalize your ad campaigns to your target audience, the better. And the best way to go about this as a media buyer is to utilize the tools that I mentioned before, because they'll help you accomplish a lot of what it takes to deliver the right ads to the right user at the right time. And they help you leverage your own data for your media buying. One of the largest shifts along with the personalized experiences is the move away from third-party cookies in media buying. Just you can no longer rely on that as a targeting mechanism. So media buyers have to find ways to use their own first-party data. And that's great, but only if you use it effectively to personalize your ad campaigns. So, for example, you would want different messaging for a prospect who hasn't converted on your website yet compared to an existing customer who you're trying to upsell. So it's just important, I think, to remember that, you have the data you need. So just make sure you use it properly. The days of having to place a generic ad on a channel and hope the right person sees it at the right time and actually takes action on it are gone.
I think it's interesting to think about the days before social media. We didn't really have that personal experience or personal tie to brands. Our relationships with brands as consumers were totally different. We basically, we consumed what we were served across social channels. And now we have this ability to build relationships with brands we like across traditional and digital channels. So we literally choose to follow brands, right? Like ask to be served content. Send me your emails, right? Send me notifications when you post something on Instagram. It's just interesting to think and crazy to think about, really. Just the introduction of digital channels just gives brands more new ways to tell their stories, and just allows us to feel so much more connected to them. So yeah, personalized experience. We want it, and you can absolutely deliver that through media buying, right? So let's talk about how to get started. Is media buying accessible for all budgets?
It is. In fact, that's one of the great things about it. You can start small. You can spend as little as $5 a day if you want to, just to get in there and get your hands dirty with these ad platforms, right? And then think about this too. With so many ad channels available, you also want to align your creative with the media you are buying across those channels to create a unified experience. There's just so many screens now, right? You don't want the same ad on a streaming service, on a social platform, on mobile, and in a gaming app, for example, all at the same time. So you want to tell your brand story across channels for the best experience at key moments in the user's journey. So that's the best thing. I would say the best way to get started is to do it, right? You can read all about it. There's a ton of resources out there, but actually getting in there and doing it and trying it and testing it, that's where you will learn the most. And like I said, you can start with really small budgets if you want, just to figure things out and go from there, see what works, what doesn't. And a lot of ad platforms, really, they have great help and support resources too to walk you through everything.
I never would have thought you could start your media buying strategy at $5. That's great. That's really good to know.
Yeah, you might not get much back, but it's a good start.
Yes. Walk and then run, right?
Yeah.
So what we're learning here is that in media buying, it's always evolving. And so with that said, what, Lisa, are the top trends to look out for when it comes to media buying in 2023?
Great question. Yeah, I have a few. So connected TV for sure is going to be big this year. It's still a growing space for streaming platforms and for media buyers. It can be costly and it is still fragmented, but now's a really good time to get started with it and figure out how to make it work for your brand or your client. As more streaming platforms move to ad-supported models, they're doing that in an effort to retain their subscribers at a lower cost. It's just opening up a lot of premium inventory opportunities for media buyers. And actually sports coverage too is starting to move into the world of streaming. So that would be another trend to keep an eye on this year. Another one is emerging platforms. They can provide a lot of opportunity this year. The media buying space is becoming more diverse and less dominated by the usual players. So I'm talking about emerging platforms like digital audio, digital out-of-home, in-game advertising, retail media networks, Amazon, TikTok, just to name a few. So definitely keep an eye on that. And I think lastly, I mentioned first-party data, which we know is already a hot topic. But along with that is the opportunity that contextual advertising provides. So with that, you can target your ads based on the content a consumer is reading, and it's not reliant on cookies for targeting.
So the top three things you had said to kind of trends, I guess, to be on the lookout for in 2023, it's that connected TV, those emerging platforms that are allowing easier kind of, easy media buying and different opportunities such as like the audio, digital out of home, in-game, TikTok, those types of things. And then, of course, the importance of first-party data. So this has been great, Lisa. Those are the series of my questions. So the last thing I'll ask you before we conclude is there anything you would like to plug?
Sure. Well, I already plugged CallTrackingMetrics earlier, but I cannot say enough about it as a tool for media buying. I think about how many media campaigns I worked on in the past and how I could have made smarter buying decisions had I just known how valuable my conversions were. and been able to extract data from customer conversations. With media buying and your ad campaigns, like volume is great when measuring your results, but the value is really what matters. And I think lastly, this isn't a plug, but more of a recommendation to media buyers, and that is just to keep a pulse on the industry. We're just talking about trends, things that are going to be big this year weren't really last year. So the landscape technology is always evolving and changing, either within a platform like Google Ads to the new platforms that can provide opportunities. So stay on top of that and go from there.
But this has been so great, Lisa. Just to summarize for our audience, so kind of in a nutshell, what we've learned and talked a lot about today is that media buying has changed dramatically in the last decade. New technologies have increased the opportunities for placement as well as measurement of that placement, allowing marketers to better understand their customers and the impact of their media buys so that they can make smarter decisions. Again, technology just helping to make great changes everywhere, and it's impacted media buying too. So thanks again, Lisa, for sharing your knowledge with us. Very much appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for all you do for CTM too. I must say that as well.
Thank you.
And as always, thank you to our listeners for your support. Be sure to follow us at Smart Route Pod on Twitter. We will talk to you soon.